My mother wants me, my siblings, to forgive our manipulative golden child older brother for stealing our younger brother's fiancée, and then, I never thought I'd see the day when my family could unravel like this. If someone had told me a year ago that my older brother Caleb would do something so unforgivable, I'd have laughed. Caleb has always been the golden child, the one who did everything right. Or at least, that's what my mom has always made us believe. But now, sitting here in my apartment, replaying the nightmare that happened just weeks ago, I can't stop thinking. How did we get here? It started with Logan's wedding, or what was supposed to be Logan's wedding. My younger brother, Logan, is the most genuine person I know. He's quiet, thoughtful, the kind of guy who'd give you his last dollar without a second thought. When he got engaged to Avery, we were all thrilled. Avery was smart, funny, and seemed to love Logan just as much as he loved her. They were perfect together. One of those couples you see and just know they're going to last. And then Caleb happened. The details are still murky, even now. One week, Logan and Avery were picking out flowers and finalizing the guest list. The next week, Avery was calling off the wedding. I remember that day so clearly because Logan showed up at my door completely broken. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed from crying. He told me Avery had ended things. She wouldn't explain why, just said she couldn't go through with it. At first, I thought maybe it was cold feet. It happens, right? Weddings are stressful. But then the truth came out. Not even 3 days later, Caleb, the same Caleb who was supposed to be Logan's best man, showed up at a family barbecue with Avery. My mom, Linda, had invited us all over for family time. I hadn't seen Logan since he showed up crying at my door, and I was hoping to check on him. I'll never forget the moment Caleb strolled into the backyard with Avery, holding his hand like it was the most normal thing in the world. The entire yard went silent, like someone had hit pause on real life. I looked at Caleb, then at Avery, trying to process what I was seeing. What the hell is this? I asked, louder than I meant to. Caleb, the king of smug grins, shrugged like it was no big deal. Avery and I are together now. Logan wasn't there, thank God. But my sister Riley, who'd been pouring lemonade, dropped the pitcher. Glass shattered on the patio. My mom looked at Caleb with an expression I couldn't read, but it wasn't shock. That was the first red flag for me. Linda knew. Somehow, she knew this was happening, and she hadn't warned anyone. You're joking, I said, my voice shaking. I was hoping this was some sick prank, but Avery wouldn't look at me. She kept her gaze fixed on the grass, her face flushed with guilt. Caleb gave me his calm-down look, something I've hated since we were kids. It's complicated, Mason, he said, his tone maddeningly casual. But this is what's best for everyone. For everyone? I snapped. What about Logan? What about the fact you just stole your brother's fiancée? Avery flinched at the word stole, but Caleb didn't miss a beat. Things didn't work out between her and Logan. We didn't plan this, but I didn't let him finish. I stormed off, too angry to even look at him. Riley followed me into the kitchen. She was shaking as she whispered, "Did you see Mom? She didn't even say anything. It's like she's okay with this." That was the second red flag. Linda had always had a soft spot for Caleb. He was the oldest, the one who made the family proud with his college degree and corporate job. Meanwhile, Logan and I were just Logan and I. I always joked that we were the spare parts of the family, but now, it didn't feel so funny. Later that night, I called Logan. I asked him if he knew about Caleb and Avery. He didn't. He didn't even sound angry when I told him. Just hollow. Of course it was Caleb, he said quietly. It's always Caleb. The fallout was immediate. Riley stopped talking to Caleb altogether. I tried to confront him again, but he brushed me off, acting like I was overreacting. My mom called me a few days later, her voice unnervingly calm. "Mason, we need to talk," she said. "About what?" I asked, still seething. "About Caleb and Avery," she replied. "We're having dinner at the house this weekend. I want you and Riley to come. It's time to move past this." I thought I'd misheard her. Asterisk move past this? Asterisk he betrayed Logan. Avery broke his heart, and Caleb. I know it's hard. She cut me off gently. But Caleb's still your brother. He made a mistake, but he's happy now. Isn't that what matters? I was speechless. My mom, who was supposed to protect all of us equally, was siding with Caleb again. I told Riley about the dinner, and she rolled her eyes. Are you kidding me? She's trying to sweep this under the rug. Typical. I didn't disagree. Still, part of me felt like I had to go. Not for Caleb. Not for my mom. For Logan. I wanted him to know someone was still in his corner. That Saturday, I showed up at my parents' house, dreading what I'd find. Riley was already there, sitting on the porch with her arms crossed. This is going to be a disaster, she muttered as I walked up. I didn't argue. When we walked inside, Caleb was already at the dining table, grinning like he hadn't just torn the family apart. And Avery? She was there too, sitting next to him like she belonged. And our mom, Linda, stood at the head of the table, smiling as if nothing was wrong. Come sit, she said brightly. We're going to have a nice family dinner. I looked at Riley, and she looked at me. The air felt so thick with tension, I thought it might suffocate me. But I took my seat, and the disaster began. I didn't want to sit at that table. If I'm being honest, I wanted to flip the damn thing over and walk out, but Logan wasn't there, and Riley and I had to represent him. Someone had to call Caleb out. Someone had to say what everyone else was too cowardly to say. Linda, my mother, stood at the head of the dining table with a spread of food so immaculate it felt like she thought cooking could solve this mess. She was smiling, forcing cheer into the room like she could manifest it into existence. Let's just sit down, eat, and talk, Linda said. I looked at Riley, who muttered under her breath, I'd rather eat glass. Caleb was sitting at the far end of the table with Avery. Avery, it still made my blood boil to see them together. Caleb had one arm lazily draped over the back of her chair like they were on a damn date. Avery, though, wouldn't make eye contact with me or Riley. She kept her head down, poking at her plate, as if the mashed potatoes were the most fascinating thing she'd ever seen. Where's Logan? I asked. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Linda gave me one of her tight-lipped, "You're ruining this" smiles. Logan decided not to come. Yeah, no kidding, Riley said, crossing her arms. Wonder why. Linda shot her a warning glare but didn't say anything. I think she knew Riley wouldn't back down. Out of all of us, Riley has always been the firecracker. She's only 2 years younger than me, but she's never been afraid to call things like she sees them, especially when it comes to Caleb. I turned my attention to Caleb, who was buttering a roll like he hadn't just detonated a nuclear bomb in our family. So, Caleb, I said, you're just okay with all of this? He looked up at me and gave me his infuriating, calm-down look. God, I hated that look. He's been giving it to me since we were kids, like he's somehow older, wiser, and above it all. What do you mean by this, Mason? This, I snapped, waving my hand at him and Avery. You stole Logan's fiancée, Caleb. The same Logan who trusted you enough to ask you to be his best man. Are you kidding me with this? Caleb sighed heavily and set his butter knife down, as if I was the unreasonable one here. Look, Mason, I know it's complicated, but Avery and I didn't plan this. Things just happened. Things just happened? Riley scoffed, leaning forward in her chair. That's your excuse? You don't accidentally fall into a relationship with your brother's fiancé, Caleb. Avery winced at Riley's words, but still didn't look up. I thought maybe she'd defend herself, say something, but she just sat there, letting Caleb do all the talking. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, his frustration finally showing. I'm not going to sit here and let you two gang up on us. Avery and I have been honest with each other. We're happy together, and we don't need your approval. Honest. I shot back. You think what you did to Logan was honest? You didn't even have the guts to tell him yourself. He had to find out from Avery when she called off the wedding. That's enough. Linda's voice rang out across the table. She looked at me with that familiar disapproving glare, the one she used when I was a kid, and talked back. We are not going to spend this dinner yelling at each other like children. Then maybe Caleb shouldn't have acted like one, Riley snapped, pushing her plate away. Riley, please, Linda said, her voice tight. This isn't helping. Caleb and Avery are here because they want to move forward as a family. We all need to forgive and let this go. Forgive and let this go. I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. So, you're just okay with this? I asked slowly. You're okay with what Caleb did to Logan? Linda's face softened, as if she were speaking to a child who just didn't understand the world. Mason, life is complicated. People make mistakes, but they deserve a chance to be happy. Happy? Riley exploded, slamming her hands on the table. Mom, Logan is miserable. You're acting like none of this matters. Caleb humiliated him, and you're here playing hostess like it's Thanksgiving dinner. Caleb stood up then, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You know what? I don't need to sit here and be attacked in my own house. I'm done with this conversation. Sit down, I snapped. My voice came out low and dangerous, even surprising myself. I was so tired of Caleb walking away from everything. Responsibility, consequences. Logan, you don't get to waltz in here with Avery like nothing happened and then act like we're the problem. Avery finally spoke up then, her voice quiet and shaky. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Riley and I turned to her. Then why did it? I asked, my anger laced with disbelief. Avery looked at Caleb, almost as if she was waiting for permission to speak. When he didn't say anything, she took a deep breath. Caleb and we started talking months ago. At first, it was innocent. But he told me things about Logan. Things that made me doubt everything. What things? Riley demanded. Avery's voice faltered. He said Logan didn't really love me. That he was just going through the motions because he felt like he had to settle down. Caleb made me feel seen. Like someone understood me. I froze, the pieces falling into place. Caleb had been planting seeds of doubt in Avery's mind for months. That was who he was. Charming, manipulative, always looking out for himself. You've got to be kidding me, Riley said, her voice dripping with disgust. You let Caleb convince you Logan didn't love you? Logan adored you, Avery. Everyone could see it. Avery flinched, but Caleb stepped in front of her, his voice cold. We're not going to sit here and let you two attack Avery. This conversation is over. Fine, I said, standing up. Then I guess I'll have this conversation with Logan instead. I'm sure he'll love hearing how his own brother was working behind the scenes to sabotage his relationship. Mason, Linda started, but I didn't let her finish. Logan deserves better than this, Mom. And if you can't see that, then I don't know what to tell you. I turned and walked out, Riley close on my heels. As soon as the front door slammed behind us, Riley let out a breath she'd clearly been holding. Unbelievable, she muttered. Caleb's not even sorry. He believes his own lies. I didn't answer. My mind was spinning with what Avery had said. How Caleb had gotten into her head and twisted her feelings. This wasn't some accidental romance. Caleb had been orchestrating this for months, and Linda, for some reason, was choosing to ignore it. As we got into Riley's car, she turned to me. We have to tell Logan. I know, I said, but I don't think this ends here. And I was right. It didn't. The ride to Logan's apartment was quiet except for the hum of Riley's engine. She didn't say anything, and neither did I. We were both thinking the same thing. How the hell were we supposed to tell Logan about this? It was one thing for Avery to call off the wedding, but knowing Caleb had been manipulating her for months, that felt like a different beast entirely. When we got to Logan's place, I half expected him not to answer. He'd been a ghost since the breakup, shutting himself away from everyone except for the occasional text. But after a moment, the door cracked open, and Logan stared at us with dark circles under his eyes. He looked thinner, like he hadn't been eating. Hey, he said, his voice quiet. Didn't think I'd see you guys tonight. Can we come in? I asked. Logan hesitated for a beat, then stepped back to let us inside. The apartment looked just as tired as he did. Takeout containers were stacked on the coffee table. The blinds were drawn, and his couch looked like it doubled as his bed these days. Logan noticed me staring and gave a humorless chuckle. Yeah, I know. It's a mess. Take a seat. He gestured to the couch, brushing some papers off the cushions. Riley and I sat, but Logan stayed standing, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He looked defensive, like he knew we hadn't come for a casual visit. What's up? He finally asked, his eyes flicking between us. Riley didn't wait. Logan, we need to tell you something about Caleb. The second she said Caleb's name, Logan tensed. His jaw tightened, and his eyes narrowed. I don't want to talk about him. You need to hear this, I said gently. It's about what really happened with Avery. Logan flinched at her name. For a second, I thought he was going to kick us out, but he let out a shaky breath and sat down in the armchair across from us. Fine. Say whatever you came here to say. I didn't sugarcoat it. Logan deserved the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Avery told us tonight that Caleb had been talking to her for months. He told her things. Made her believe you didn't really love her. Logan's expression didn't change at first. He just stared at me, completely still. I wasn't even sure he'd heard me. But then, slowly, he looked away, and his fists clenched against his thighs. So Caleb convinced her to leave me, he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Manipulated her, Riley corrected. He played with her head, Logan. She said she thought you were just settling for her because Caleb got in her ear. Logan laughed bitterly, but there was no humor in it. Of course he did. That's Caleb. He's always been good at taking things that don't belong to him. The anger in his voice surprised me. Logan has always been the calm one in our family. If I'm the middle child who's constantly stuck in the middle, and Riley is the firecracker, Logan is the quiet anchor. He doesn't get mad. He just gets sad. But now? Now he looked furious. He's done this before, Logan said suddenly, staring at the floor. What do you mean? Riley asked. Logan looked up, his expression dark. You really think this is the first time Caleb's gone after something that was mine? Remember when I tried out for the soccer team in high school? I frowned, trying to piece it together. Yeah, you didn't make the team. Logan smiled bitterly. No, I did. I made the team, but Caleb convinced the coach I was unreliable and that he'd be a better choice. I didn't find out until years later. Caleb made varsity and I got cut. Riley's eyes widened. What? Logan, why didn't you say anything? Because nobody would have believed me, he said with a shrug. It's always been Caleb. Caleb's the golden boy. Caleb can do no wrong. Hearing this, something clicked in my head. For years, Caleb had been the center of our mother's universe. He was charming, ambitious, and confident. Everything a perfect oldest son is supposed to be. But now, the cracks were showing. Caleb didn't just take things because he wanted them. He took things to win, to prove he was better than the rest of us. Logan, I said carefully, why do you think he did this? With Avery? Logan looked at me like I was stupid. Because he could. Caleb's always been jealous of me. It's subtle. He hides it well, but it's there. I think he saw how happy I was with Avery and decided he needed to take that away. Just like he's taken everything else. There was silence for a moment. Riley looked like she wanted to punch a wall, and I felt sick to my stomach. Logan was right. This wasn't just about Avery. This was about Caleb needing to prove, time and time again, that he was the best, no matter who he hurt in the process. Logan rubbed a hand over his face. You know what the worst part is? I loved her. I really, really loved her. And I trusted Caleb. I thought he was happy for me. I'm sorry, I said quietly. It felt so hollow, but I didn't know what else to say. Logan shook his head. I don't need you to be sorry. I need you to tell me what you're going to do about it. Riley frowned. What do you mean? I mean, Caleb isn't done, Logan said, his voice hard. You think he's just going to stop after this? He's already got Mom on his side. He'll keep twisting things until the rest of the family forgives him, and suddenly I'm the bad guy for not letting it go. That's what he does. Riley and I exchanged a look. I hated to admit it, but Logan was right. Our mother was already laying the groundwork for us to move past this. If we didn't do something, Caleb was going to come out on top, like always. We need to talk to Mom, Riley said. She has to see what's happening. She can't keep defending him. Logan snorted. Good luck with that. Mom will defend Caleb until the day she dies. You're wasting your time. I didn't want to believe that, but deep down, I knew Logan wasn't wrong. Linda had always made excuses for Caleb. Maybe it was because he was the firstborn. Maybe it was because he reminded her of herself. Whatever the reason, She'd been turning a blind eye to Caleb's behavior for years, and it had finally led to this. But as I sat there, watching my little brother sit in his wrecked apartment, I knew one thing for certain. Caleb wasn't getting away with this. Not this time. We're not letting him win, I said firmly. Not this time. Logan looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Because I'm done being Caleb's punching bag. As Riley and I left Logan's apartment that night, I felt something shift in me. I was done too. Done playing nice. Done letting Caleb walk all over everyone while Linda cheered him on. It was time to confront Caleb, and this time, I wasn't going to hold back. It didn't take long for Riley and me to decide what had to happen next. Caleb needed to be confronted, really confronted, and not just about Avery. This wasn't just about Logan anymore. This was about everything Caleb had been doing for years. The way he manipulated people, twisted situations, and made himself look like the perfect son while leaving the rest of us in the dirt. Logan was right. Caleb wasn't going to stop until someone made him, and we were going to make him. The next morning, Riley and I showed up at our parents' house unannounced. Linda opened the door, surprised to see us. She looked tired, like she'd been up all night worrying. Honestly? Good. She should be worrying. Mason. Riley, she said, forcing a smile. What are you doing here? We need to talk to Caleb, I said, brushing past her into the living room. Riley followed me, and Linda sighed heavily as she closed the door. This again, she said, her voice already tired. Can't you just... No, Mom. Riley cut her off, turning to glare at her. We can't. Caleb's here, right? Linda hesitated, then nodded. He's upstairs. But I don't know why you... Perfect, I said, heading for the staircase. Mason. Linda called after me. Don't start anything. I ignored her. At this point, I didn't care what Linda thought. She'd enabled Caleb long enough, and it was time for someone to do what she wouldn't. Riley and I marched up the stairs and down the hallway to Caleb's old bedroom. The door was half open, and we didn't bother knocking. I pushed the door open, and there he was, sitting on his bed with his laptop open. When he looked up and saw us, his face twisted into a mix of annoyance and smugness. To what do I owe this honor? Caleb said, closing his laptop and leaning back against the wall. Here to lecture me some more? We're not here to lecture you, I said, crossing my arms. We're here for answers. Caleb rolled his eyes. I've already explained everything. Avery and I didn't plan this. Things just happened. Why can't you guys accept that and move on? Because it's a lie, Riley snapped. Avery told us you'd been getting into her head for months, Caleb. You were sabotaging her relationship with Logan the whole time. Caleb's face darkened, but he didn't lose that smug expression. So what? Relationships fall apart all the time. It's not my fault Logan couldn't keep her. I took a step toward him, my fists clenching at my sides. You think this is a game, don't you? You don't even feel bad about what you did. Why would I? Caleb shot back. Logan was never right for Avery. I did her a favor. You stole her. Riley yelled. You manipulated her into leaving Logan because you can't stand seeing anyone else happy. Caleb stood up, his expression shifting into something colder. Watch it, Riley. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, we know exactly what we're talking about, I said, my voice low. You've been doing this for years, Caleb. Undermining Logan, taking what's his, making yourself look like the golden child while the rest of us suffer for it. Caleb smirked. You're being dramatic. Am I? I shot back. Logan told us about the soccer team, about how you convinced the coach to cut him so you could take his spot. Sound familiar? Caleb's smirk faltered for just a second, but he recovered quickly. That was years ago. Who cares? Asterisk Logan cares. Asterisk Riley snapped. You ruined that for him, just like you ruined this. Caleb laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was bitter and mocking. You guys are unbelievable. You think I'm the villain? Logan's pathetic. He always has been. He's weak, and he lets people walk all over him. I didn't steal Avery. She chose me because I'm better than him. I felt my blood boiling, but Riley was faster. She took a step forward and jabbed a finger at Caleb's chest. You're not better than anyone, Caleb. You're a liar and a manipulator, And the only reason you get away with it is because Mom lets you. Leave Mom out of this, Caleb growled. Why? Riley shot back. You're her favorite, and we all know it. She'll defend you no matter what you do. At that moment, Linda appeared in the doorway. What's going on in here? She demanded, her voice sharp. Ask your perfect son, Riley said, turning to glare at her. He just admitted to manipulating Avery into leaving Logan. Linda's face paled, and she looked at Caleb. Is that true? Of course not, Caleb said smoothly, his voice softening. They're twisting my words, Mom. I never did that. Bullshit, Riley shouted. You said Avery chose you because you're better than Logan? Linda turned to Caleb, her expression unreadable. Caleb looked at her with wide, innocent eyes, like he always did when he needed to get out of trouble. Mom, come on. You know me. I'd never do something like that. Linda hesitated, and I could see the doubt in her eyes. For a second, I thought maybe, she'd finally see Caleb for who he really was. And then, as always, she folded. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding, she said, her voice tight. We're not going to solve anything by yelling. Riley let out a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. You're still defending him. I'm not defending anyone. Linda shot back. But I'm not going to let this family fall apart over a relationship that didn't work out. This family already has fallen apart, I said quietly. And it's because of Caleb. Caleb shrugged, looking bored. Cry about it. I'm done with this conversation. No, Riley said sharply. We're done with you. What's that supposed to mean? Caleb asked, narrowing his eyes. It means we're not letting you win this time, I said. Logan's done. Riley's done. And so am I. You're on your own, Caleb. For the first time, Caleb looked genuinely rattled. You can't just cut me out of the family. Watch us, Riley said coldly. I turned to Linda, who looked stricken. Mom, you can pretend Caleb's perfect all you want, but the rest of us aren't playing along anymore. You're either with him, or you're with us. You decide. Linda looked at me like I'd slapped her. You can't ask me to choose. You've already chosen, Riley said quietly. You just don't realize it. Caleb said nothing as we left. For once, he didn't have a smug comeback or a lazy shrug. I think he realized in that moment that he'd pushed too far, that he'd finally lost control. As Riley and I walked out of the house, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. Caleb might not face real consequences today, but he would eventually. People like Caleb always do. And for the first time, I wasn't going to be there to catch him when he fell. We didn't hear from Caleb or Linda for a few days after that confrontation. Honestly, I think they were both waiting for us to come crawling back like we always did. Especially Linda. That's how it had always gone in our family. Caleb messed up, Mom smoothed it over, and the rest of us had to bite our tongues for the sake of family unity. But not this time. Riley and I had made our choice, and when we told Logan about what happened at the house, he actually looked relieved. It's about time, he muttered, shaking his head. You have no idea how long I felt like I was screaming into a void. Over the next week, Linda tried to reach out to us, first through calls, then through texts. Every message was the same. Asterisk, we need to talk. This isn't how family acts. Asterisk, I know you're angry, but this has gone too far. Caleb is your brother. Asterisk, you don't understand the whole story. Come to dinner, and let's talk about this. Asterisk, we ignored her. For the first time, Riley, Logan, and I were on the same page, and it felt freeing. Caleb wasn't our responsibility anymore. If Linda wanted to cling to him, that was her choice, but we didn't have to play along. Unfortunately, Caleb wasn't done. It was a Thursday night when I got a call from an unknown number. I don't usually pick those up, but something told me to answer. Hello? Mason. It was Caleb. For a second, I didn't say anything. I'd half expected him to show up at my door, but hearing his voice still caught me off guard. He sounded off, not smug or arrogant, but desperate. What do you want? I asked, my voice flat. I need to talk to you, Caleb said quickly. It's important. Hard pass. Mason, please. His voice cracked, and it startled me. Caleb never asked for anything. He demanded it. Against my better judgment, I said, "Fine.
Talk.
Not over the phone. Meet me at the depot in an hour. Please." The depot was an old diner we used to go to as kids. It felt weirdly symbolic, like Caleb was trying to tap into some shared history to guilt me into listening. I didn't want to go, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. An hour later, I walked into the depot. Caleb was already there, sitting at a booth in the corner. He looked rough. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and he had bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. For a second, I didn't recognize him. "What do you want, Caleb?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from him. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared down at the table, his fingers drumming nervously on the surface. "I messed up," he said finally, his voice low. I laughed bitterly. "Yeah, no kidding. No, Mason. I really messed up. More than you realize." Something about the way he said it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I'd never seen Caleb like this. He looked scared. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Caleb took a deep breath, then let it out shakily. "I'm in trouble. Bad trouble." He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw it in his eyes. Panic. "What kind of trouble?" Caleb ran a hand through his hair, his fingers trembling. "Debt." "Debt?" He nodded. "I owe a lot of people a lot of money. I tried to fix it, Mason. I did. But it got out of control. Avery." He trailed off, his voice breaking. "Avery was part of the fix." "What do you mean?" I asked, my stomach dropping. Caleb looked at me, and I swear I'd never seen him look so ashamed. "I needed money. I thought if I could get closer to Avery, I could, I don't know, convince her to help me out. Her family has money, and I thought maybe—" "You used her?" I interrupted, stunned. "You manipulated Avery because of your debt?" Caleb flinched, but he didn't deny it. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't think she'd leave Logan for me. But once it started, I couldn't stop it." I stared at him, trying to process what he just said. Caleb hadn't just stolen Logan's fiancée because he wanted to win. He'd done it because he was desperate. He'd played with Avery's feelings, destroyed Logan's life, and torn our family apart, all to cover up the mess he'd made for himself. "Does Mom know?" I asked quietly. Caleb shook his head. "No, and she can't. If she finds out, she'll what? Finally see you for who you really are." I said bitterly. "Good. She deserves to know the truth. Mason, please." Caleb's voice was pleading now. "I'm asking you to help me. I don't have anyone else." "Help you?" I laughed in disbelief. "Are you serious? After everything you've done?" "You're my brother," Caleb said weakly. "Family's supposed to stick together. Don't you dare pull the family card." I shot back. "You don't get to hide behind that after what you did to Logan." Caleb looked at me like a drowning man begging for a life raft. "Please, I can't fix this without you." For the first time in my life, I felt nothing for Caleb. No anger, no resentment, just emptiness. He wasn't my brother anymore. He was just a man who'd burned every bridge he'd ever had. "You need help, Caleb," I said, standing up. "But it's not going to come from me." Caleb opened his mouth to argue, but I walked away before he could say another word. Riley, Logan, and I met at my apartment later that night. I told them everything Caleb had admitted, and for once, nobody was surprised. "He's always been like this," Logan said quietly. "It just took him this long to fall apart." "What about Mom?" Riley asked. "Do we tell her?" I thought about it for a long moment, then shook my head. "No, she's made her choice. If she wants to believe Caleb's perfect, let her. But we're done. With him, with her, with all of it." For the first time in years, I felt free. Caleb wasn't my responsibility anymore, and neither was Linda. I'd spent my whole life trying to hold this family together, but now I realized something. Sometimes, you have to let things fall apart. Logan looked at me and Riley, a faint smile on his face. "We're going to be okay, right?" "Yeah," I said, smiling back. "We're going to be okay." And for once, I believed it.